the big question is, how am I going to, all kinds of things. How am I going to support myself? How am I going to get my work out there? Is a big one. And of course, what we've been talking about, what should I paint? Sometimes that is a big question for somebody. They've acquired all this skill in their training, and then what do they paint? And sometimes there's not a lot of room in there for variation to paint and be unique, and stand out from your peers in a special way. So for me, I left graduate school, and I started to teach right away. And the income that brought in really bought me time in the studio to start to explore. And not all of it is very glorious. Like, I'll say, my first years out of grad school, I really wanted to secure a gallery and to have a relationship with the gallery and to have the gallery like me and be in support of my work. And so I found that what was sort of safe and sanctioned by a lot of galleries was to paint still life. And I don't think there's any shame in painting still life at all. And I honestly, I love painting still life. And I did so for many years. And I think I'm really good at it. I did a lot of still life when I first got out of graduate school. So I'm getting into the answer here. And I would show those in galleries, and they would sell. I think that painting still life for a gallery is a great way to really push yourself in your skills, your chops, the technical aspects of your painting, because you can try out all kinds of subject matter. I mean, of course, you start with bowls of fruit, but you might find yourself painting really challenging things, like a big tangle of branches or something, or drapery that's, knotted and tangled and convoluted with other things wrapped up in it. And you could really challenge yourself with all the different kinds of subject matter that can be painted, and test yourself in that regard. And of course, you have a lot of time and space and privacy to do that when you paint still life. You can take all the time you want to sit in front of that still life table, and no one's looking over your shoulder. There's no model waiting to take a break or, to be paid, and so forth. So still life was a good friend of mine as an early painter. And I think that ended up spilling out into painting interiors, painting hallways and rooms and looking through doorways into kitchens with beautiful light and space. And there's a wonderful tradition of interiors where there are no figures, and yet they're full of mood and feeling, and they really test the painter's ability to paint light and space and perspective and atmosphere. I did a lot of interiors, and somewhere along the way, I think I found stability. I think fairly early on, I found stability in a combination of teaching and painting still life. I will say that I knew that the whole time I was really pleasing the gallery. I showed with John Pence Gallery in San Francisco for 14 years. And John was a wonderful dealer. He's still alive, but he's retired now in his 80s. And wonderful support and dealer, and had an incredible gallery in San Francisco full of a lot of contemporary realists that are still working. And it was a wonderful community too. But John really wanted me to paint a lot of still life. And he would often tell his newer painters that were just joining the stable of artists at the gallery, he'd say, I want you to paint me a show of 30 still lifes. And they can be small, but I want them, all to be very cohesive, similar lightings. I want you to frame them all the same way, and we'll give you your first solo show. And I think that was a formula that worked for a lot of painters. I think they were able to kind of enter the scene with something that seemed really well unified and coordinated in its appearance. A lot of it would sell, and that would sound good to the world that this painter is selling. But I, pretty quickly after doing that, I felt that this is not what I dreamed for myself. What did I dream about doing? And of course, I looked I thought about painters that really excited me, and those were Velázquez and Caravaggio and Odd Nerdrum and then Bo Bartlett and Vincent Desiderio. These were painters that I saw their work that were doing large paintings with multiple figures that had a narrative of some kind. And that's what really made me go through all the training and the study. And I thought that I'm going to do that one day. I think it's important for an artist to call it when they feel like they've kind of had that transitional period out of school, solidified what kind of techniques they use, how they paint, what their paintings kind of look like, the palette they use. Are they direct painters? Are they indirect painters? I mean, you know, do they just do mostly alla prima? Do they like to do a lot of glazing? They have to figure that stuff out. And I think that can be done in that sort of fledgling period when you leave the nest of the art school. You know, and that's why still life is a great thing. But there's an important moment to stop being the fledgling and really start to soar high. You know, like that was the goal, is I wanted to soar way up there in the clouds, if we're using a bird analogy, leaving the nest. And that can be scary too, because you wonder, am I going to stop selling? Are the galleries going to start to kind of not want to show my work because they're bigger and they might be weird, they might be scary, they might embrace grotesque theme. Galleries start to go, about that. You know, that's the challenge that the artist can face as they start to leave that fledgling stage of being an artist, a new artist, and start to move into their more mid-career maybe. They might find that if they're being true to themselves in the artwork they want to make, that really what inspired them in the first place, they might also find it's not easy to sell or to show. And there's a trade-off there. And hopefully you've got the stability financially that maybe you can afford not to sell a little bit while your work goes through this new coming out of a cocoon phase where you're really going to be the more mature painter that you will become. And there's big trade-offs, because while you're really nurturing your dream and your vision and you're following that passion that you always saw for yourself, you might also be suffering in other ways. You know, all the things I mentioned, not selling, galleries maybe treating you with a little bit of an aversion because your work is big and takes up a lot of wall space. If you make big paintings that take up a lot of wall space, galleries, and I don't blame them, they're not really going to like that, because they have very expensive rents to pay. You know, I can sympathize with a gallery in New York City or San Francisco or Los Angeles. They have to have a space in a very affluent part of town with a lot of traffic so that people will see the work. They need to be available to clients that have a lot of money, that are interested in collecting artwork. They have very challenging rents. You know, if we could see those figures, we would kind of be horrified. And then when you present them with the idea of showing a large, challenging painting of yours that has, you know, things that are not necessarily pleasant or happy to put on your wall at home, that take up the entire wall of that room in the gallery, they're going to sort of be nervous, because there goes their rent for the month. You know, whereas if you give them 30 still lives, they're pretty happy, because even if they sell 10 of those, then they're okay. They're in good shape. So that is some tricky territory for the fledgling artist becoming the mature painter to have to navigate. And that's kind of maybe that's where I find myself nowadays. You know, it's embracing the work that I really wanted to do and doing it and feeling good about that. But understanding that it's going to be harder to show my work because of its size. These paintings behind me are much more moderately sized. They're like around 40 inches square-ish, you know, or in that size range. But you know, I just completed a painting that's 9 feet tall by 7 feet wide. And that's hard to exhibit, you know, and it's also hard to find a home for it. Even if I found the past couple paintings I've done that have been that scale, a lot of people do want them, but the reality is they can't fit them in their houses, apartments, or even if they can, this has been a real heartbreaker, even if they can fit them in their apartments. If let's say you have an affluent collector in New York City who wants to own your large painting and they can fit it in their apartment, they live in, you know, an older pre-war Upper East Side apartment in Manhattan, and there actually is no freight elevator, and the stairwells